Welcome back, guys. It's Israel. Today I want to cover Func in C# and how you can use it with LINQ to allow you to create reusable C# queries that are elegant, generic, and easy to read. So let's dive into what are funcs first, and then into actual code examples of how you would actually sort of use these in real world situations. But first, I want to give a quick shout out to all my channel members. If you guys want to see your names here, as well as get access to all the code from all my videos, click the link in the description or the join button on my profile, and then send an email to this email with the code that you want access to. But now, into the video. So what is a func in C#? A func is a generic delegate. Delegates are just pointers to functions that take in some values and return a result. As I explained in my last video, the card should be somewhere up here where I go in more in depth into delegates and some really cool examples. I highly recommend you guys check that one out. In case functions and delegates are a little bit confusing, I explain a lot more about delegates over there, obviously. And a func is a built-in generic delegate that represents a method with 0 to many inputs and a return value. The last type parameter is the return type, and everything before the last type parameter is obviously the inputs. A func can be generic, so it can be defined with many different types in mind, as long as they follow the same pattern or the same definition of the method, allowing for obviously reusable code, as we will see later when I get into my examples. A func must always return a value. Func is often used with lambda expressions since they allow for reusing of code, as well as creating inline methods that are easy to read. They also work really well with LINQ, with func being able to take the place of the predicate in many of the LINQ functions, like in where and select, allowing for reusable and flexible code, as we're going to see in our examples. So inside of the where or the select, as we're going to see, really the lambda expression is the func, allowing the function to really take in different values and be able to pass in different conditions into those where or select, so that instead of having to do a bunch of different if statements and writing the whole thing out, you can just sort of call and pass in these new values into the func, and it allows you to just reuse the same LINQ query. So func and LINQ work super well together, and I want to show you guys some examples now that are really based on real world examples that I've seen, and I want you guys to kind of see the magic and how cool func and LINQ are together. So let's get in there. Alright guys, so this is the project. It is an Angular frontend with a .NET API. I've used this in a handful of videos, so some of you might have already seen it. But essentially, we are going to have two drop downs here. This is basically for sorting. If you guys want to learn more about how the sorting works, go check out that delegate video that I mentioned. Other than that, in this, we have a table of 10 Pokemon. These 10 Pokemon are coming from a local SQL database that I have, this sample database, that is going to have the 10 Pokemon, as well as they have the types, and then Pokemon are from regions, and then Pokemon has the type ID and the region ID, and then that's how they connect to everything. So that's the Pokemon that's in this table, and then here we have just three data points for how many rock types, steel types, and fighting types, and this will make sense why I even have this here. And then here we have a button that we click, and it's going to retrieve the name of a given Pokemon, and it is for one of our examples. But in our API, we essentially have this controller. We're going to have get Pokemon, get with filters, create, edit, delete, and then we have for the dropdowns, get regions and get types. And then we have these two new examples, get single Pokemon and get specific Pokemon count. And we're going to dive into these examples in a second, but this is what our controller looks like. And then we implement a lot of the functionality in our repository. And then we have our Pokemon class here, as I just showed. We have the Pokemon ID, name, type ID, Pokedex number, region ID, and then we have their navigation to region and type. So that is very quickly sort of some of the structure, not really that important to, the func that we're going to dive into. But now let's actually dive into my func example. So let's go into example number 1. But before we dive into the first example, I just want to say that my examples are really just going to be to show the possibilities of what you can do with LINQ and func together. There might be some scenarios where just using a straight up LINQ query without a func is better, but I do want to show you guys the capabilities, because at your job on a personal project, you might have a scenario where a func with LINQ is better than just using multiple LINQ queries. So my examples are just to show you guys what you can actually do, not necessarily this is what you need to do every single time in these given examples. So let's dive into the first one. The first one's going to be when we create a Pokemon. Obviously, we receive a Pokemon object from the front end, and then we actually do it in the create Pokemon in the repository. So let's go to that method. So right here, we have the create Pokemon method. In here, we are first going to check, hey, does this Pokemon exist? So obviously you could do, hey, do a query to just check, hey, does a Pokemon match this ID? Return the object if it exists, or any, or whatever you want to do. But in here, we're actually going to use a func. So we have this method that is check Pokemon exists, and it's going to actually do the check, does this exist or not? If it doesn't exist, then we go ahead and create it. Does it exist? Then we just throw an exception. So let's go check what we're doing in check Pokemon exists. So this is the check Pokemon exists method. It receives this func in here, and we're going to return a bool from this method. But in here, what is happening? Essentially, this func is saying we're going to receive a Pokemon object, something is going to evaluate, and it's going to return a bool, either true or false, and it's going to be a filter. And what are we passing in to check Pokemon exists? Well, what we're passing in is this right here, this evaluation of, we are passing in the Pokemon object, and we are evaluating whether these two are equal or not, right? So based on the Pokemon object that we pass in, this is going to evaluate to either true or false. That is what we are passing in right here, a Pokemon object that evaluates to true or false. And this func perfectly matches what the where method in LINQ needs. So you can directly pass this into here, and it will evaluate to true or false, because obviously when you use a where clause, you are filtering down to something. So with here, we don't even have to say we're using region ID or we're using type ID. This is just going to evaluate based on whatever you pass in to here. So this would work if you were to change this not to Pokemon ID. You could do region ID, you could do type ID, you could do name, you could do any type of, condition right here, and it would work with this method. And I think that's one of the really cool things, where basically no matter what, you just have to pass in something into here, into this func, and it will evaluate correctly and work with where. So that's the first one, where if you had to do different things to pass into the where, you could just pass it in as a func, and it will work perfectly into here, and you're not just boxed into only the Pokemon ID per se. You could do different things and reuse this method, and then you would just be able to use this and get an evaluation of whether it exists or not. So that is the first basic example that I have for you guys, where we're just using the where method and then just checking, does this exist or not? Let's move on to the second example. Our second example has to do with this button. Essentially in here, we are going to call the method of get single Pokemon. I'm going to have this one hard-coded to pass in just number 3, but obviously you could have this to where you click any item in here, and then it could have a pop-up that shows you the full information on these, not just these 3 values, right? So with this, I am on the front end just going to have it hard-coded to 3. I think 3 is going to return Hawlucha, very on trend because of his new Mega Evolution, but here nor there. Here nor there. So whenever I click this button, we're going to hit here. We're going to get a 3. Let's just say I clicked the 3rd row because Hawlucha is the 3rd Pokemon. So what we're doing here is we're passing in the ID into get single Pokemon, which is this one right here, get single Pokemon. We pass in a func of the filter, and then we're passing in a func for the selector, because our filter is going to go into the where, and then our selector is going to go into the select. So I hope you guys are starting to see kind of how powerful this is, where we're passing in any filter and anything to select, and it will just grab the first Pokemon or first item that it has, and it's going to be, again, also generic, because we're telling it that, hey, at compile time, we still don't know what it's going to receive, so we need you to be flexible, and this is how we do that exactly. So in here, we're going to pass in that Pokemon ID equals the ID, so we want our where to accept that we're, filtering on ID, and then we want to select the name. So we are saying that we want to select a new Pokemon and only grab the name. That's all we want in our object. So we're going to step through, and we're going to see that we're now here. Our get base query method is just this one right here, where it basically just does goes to the Pokemon table, includes region and type, and has an IQueryable. So that then we can append our logic into, which again, if you guys are ever doing filtering, sorting, anything like that, and you want your query to be efficient and not get everything into memory, you want to use an IQueryable, and I should have a video about that as well. IEnumerable versus IQueryable, if you guys want to learn more about that as well. But now, here we're going to get our base query. So we have our Pokemon table with region and type, all of that included. But now we're actually going to filter based on the ID, and then we're going to select the name and just get the first instance of that. So we're going to step through and now press continue. And we're going to see that we get Hawlucha back. So what did we do here? In our controller, we basically passed in ID and then we selected name. What could we do here? If we, again, wanted to get a single Pokemon by, their region ID or their type ID, and then we wanted to select more information and we wanted to be flexible, we could reuse this multiple different times depending on the scenario, and it would be extremely flexible. So that was the second example, and now let's get into the third example, which is based on something I sort of did at work, and that's what inspired me to do this video because I thought it was so cool, and I wanted to share it with all of you guys. But before we get into that really cool example, if you guys found this video helpful, please drop a like on this video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the other amazing content that I have for you guys. And likes go a long way to helping this video spread on YouTube. But now let's get into the example. So my final example is going to be this one. Get specific Pokemon counts. And I'm just now noticing specific is spelled incorrectly. Ignore that. So where is that? So that comes back to these values up here. Essentially, when the page loads, we're going to be showing metrics per se of how many rock types we have, steel types, fighting types, just showing information to the user, right? And how can we do that with reusing kind of what we're doing? Well, we can use a func. What we're going to do here is we're going to call in our repository a function called get specific Pokemon count. What are we going to be passing into that? We're going to be passing in a func that is going to be a type ID, as well as it's going to be the Pokedex number of what we're looking for, because we want to also select on that. So let's go into the get specific Pokemon count so you guys can see the method. So for the 3 different counts, or, obviously if we have, I think, how many types do we have? 18 different types, right? And let's just say Pokemon, they add in a new random type, right, in a couple years, then this would be flexible enough and we could reuse this for all of them. So if we wanted to do this for all the types, we would have some type of for loop that would loop over all of these and accumulate all these numbers and then pass it into the front end if we wanted to actually show all of them. But for this example, I just want to do 3. I didn't want to go through the whole for loop example. But essentially, I'm showing you guys what you can actually do with the func, which is we're reusing the same exact method, but to get rock, I believe, we're just passing in the type ID. To get steel, we're just passing in 17. And to get fighting, we're just passing in this. And then let's now go here. What are we doing in the get specific Pokemon count? We are again passing in a func that gets a Pokemon and is going to evaluate to true or false. And we are again doing that here. And we're going to return an actual result. So with that being said, the filter goes into the where again. Our selector goes into select. And then we're going to do a distinct count. Right? So depending on what the filter is and what we're selecting, we are going to get distinct counts that are going to be different. And we're just reusing, again, the base query, and we're reusing all of this. The only thing that's different is what it receives to filter and select. Obviously, you could get rid of the select, but I'm just going, I'm just showing you guys what you could do, because in your given example, you might need to select different things to then actually calculate your values. So I just want to show you guys a specific example that looks sort of like that. So in this case, what we would do is we're going to get different values based on all of this and then pass it to our front end. So with that, let's actually test it. So let me just refresh. Let me refresh and put a breakpoint, actually. Let's refresh. So in here, we are going to do this, and we are going to step through. So what we're going to do is we're going to get the rock Pokemon count. So we're going to get our filter here, where it's our Boolean with our Pokemon object. The Boolean is what we're returning. And then in here, obviously, again, another Pokemon with our T result. So again, we have this int that we're going to get back because we are selecting, I believe, a number, right? Yeah, we're selecting a Pokedex number, and then we're just basically counting the distinct numbers that we get, right? Here, we step through, and we're going to step through, and then we're going to come back, and then we're going to do the same thing, but now with 17. And then now with that, and then now basically we have our three numbers. So we have 2, we have 3, and we have 2. So let's check, right? We go through here. We go to the front. We have 2 rock types. What are the rock types? Tyranitar, and then we have Rampardos. Steel, we have Steelix, Scizor, and we have Metagross. And fighting, we have Hawlucha and Infernape. And we can get into the double typings or whatever, but just keep it simple, guys. Keep it simple. But that is it, guys. Those are the 3 examples that I wanted to show you guys. I know for some of these, you can get away with just using a LINQ query, but really I want to show you guys just how cool LINQ and function are together. Specifically, I ran into something kind of like the counts at work, and I thought it was really cool, and I wanted to share with you guys because it's definitely a more advanced thing within C#, and I know funcs and delegates can be a little tricky and scary to dive into, but I hope I showed you guys just how cool they really are and why there could be scenarios where, you know, a regular LINQ query is not going to work, and actually being able to pass in a function is super powerful, and I want you guys to know that you can do that in C#. So with that being said, I did say that funcs are built in delegates that come straight out the box with C#. Well, maybe you didn't understand what I meant by that. Well, go check out the video that I mentioned earlier about delegates, and you'll understand why delegates are awesome and also work great with LINQ to make your queries just so much better, especially when you're sorting.